Welcome to Self-Regulation, the Foundation of Human Development, presented by Thrive. The PowerPoint that I'm about to show you was created by the Algoma Self-Reg Community of Practice, which is a collection of agencies in Sault Ste. Marie in the Algoma District who are working together to address self-regulation. And just before we get started, I just wanted to make the note that this isn't the end-all and be-all of self-regulation. I am by no means an expert in self-regulation. This is just the foundation of what we're basing our approach at Thrive on. And we just wanted to share this information with you and then show you ways to access some more information if this is something you're interested in learning more about. So I'm no expert, but I'm just here to share with you today some starter information about self-regulation. For the agenda for this presentation, we're going to be looking at the Stuart Shanker method of self-regulation. We're going to talk about human development. We'll get into defining self-regulation. We'll talk about the 5 steps in the Shanker method of self-reg. We'll talk about the different domes of self-regulation, and then kind of giving you guys some tips and some strategies to get started, and then giving you lots of resources where you can access more information. Stress is everywhere, and we all experience stress. The important part about self-regulation is it's looking at stress and how we respond to it. This slide demonstrates the outcomes of stress overload, and we're at a point in society where we need to adapt to the stressors in the environment in a more effective way to target the challenges our kids are having. And if you look at everything going on right now, the reason I'm sitting here filming this presentation in my living room is due to the COVID-19 pandemic, which has certainly changed the way we do things, and it's added a very thick layer of stress onto all of our lives. On this slide, you're seeing different outcomes from stress overload. So looking at developmental disorders, internalizing problems such as depression, anxiety, panic disorder, externalizing disorders like aggression or conduct disorder, cognitive problems, risky behavior, obesity, cardiovascular disease, autoimmune disorders, cancer, and educational outcomes are all outcomes of stress overload. So self-regulation has suggested that at the root of each of these is self-reg and stress. Right now, we're seeing an explosion in the number of students with significant problems in behavior, mood, and learning, all of which involve self-regulation. And we need to remember that self-regulation precedes self-control. Children who are not regulated cannot practice self-control, and oftentimes self-control and self-regulation get used to mean the same when they are not. So when babies are born and into toddlerhood and childhood, infants and toddlers are developing a sense of trust, safety, and comfort as they move from completely dependent to some independence. Children learn when challenges and conditions are just right and they aren't overwhelmed. So they really need those ideal learning conditions for them to learn all the new skills that they need to learn. When looking at human development, we want to talk a little bit about secondary altriciality. So when human babies are born, we're born fairly prematurely, meaning that compared to other animals, the human brain is remarkably immature at birth. So animals like horses and giraffes will have 1 to 2 babies, and when they're born, they can get up, walk, get their own food. Kittens and puppies, dogs and cats, when they have litters of babies, these babies would not survive without their moms and dads. And for humans, in order for us to become who we are, we're born very early in gestation, mainly because our head needs to get out of the birth canal, our brain can't fully develop. After birth, for the first year or so, babies rely on caregivers for co-regulation until they're able to develop the neural patterns to self-regulate themselves. So baby's capacity for self-regulation is barely in startup mode when they're born. So this slide here, you see the mom holding the crying baby, and we want to talk a little bit about the intrabrain and what we see here. So what do caregivers do to develop self-calming neural patterns? Because babies are born early, they depend on the intrabrain. A higher level brain is needed to regulate the core needs of a developing infant. During the early years of life, an infant's capacity to establish an intrabrain connection gradually expands from just their primary caregivers outwards, and even our teens still require the support of the intrabrain. The intrabrain is an external brain, so mom and dad, grandma and grandpa, babies need other brains to help regulate their own. So in this video here, you'll see Emerson. Emerson here showing the startle reflex. So every time mom blows her nose, he startles. But then you see him looking to his mom. He's making that eye contact.
Does Mummy's nose scare you when I blow it?
She's like, okay, mom, like, is this okay? What's happening? And his mother helps him to calm, and she's creating those neural patterns, helping him to create in his brain those neural patterns of calm and connection. And through co-regulation, he's learning to read the environment. So he gets startled, but then you see he's looking at mom. Mom is showing calm. You can't see mom, but we're assuming. Mom is showing calm, and then he knows that, okay, this is okay, and I'm safe. I'm safe and secure. So now we're going to look at the evolution design brain. This is a metaphor for dividing the brain into 3 different parts. So I'm not saying there's only 3 sections in the brain. All the lobes and everything are still the same, but this is just looking at how the brain is broken down into 3 different areas. It's a metaphor for the 3 brain states where different areas are more in charge at a different time. You'll see the brown brain. This is called the reptilian brain. This part of the brain was developed first, and it represents the freeze mode. So if you imagine back into prehistoric times, and even with a turtle, when they sense threat, they immediately withdraw into their shell. And it's like they're playing dead. So this is their mode of survival. So back reptilian times, this is how animals would survive, is by doing freeze mode. We often do see this in some of our kids as well as one of their coping mechanisms. Over time, the limbic brain, which is the red brain in this image, this was developed for that fight or flight response. It's not at a conscious level. It's where we sense threat and our brain sends signals to the body to respond immediately, either by fleeing or by fighting. We want to think of this as like an alarm that goes off when it senses danger, and it goes off to take control over our bodies and to protect us. Lastly, as humans evolved, we evolved the ability to use social cues to scan the environment for safety. So this is the blue brain. We use cues that we obtain through our eyes and ears, reading other facial expressions to help with social engagement, which then allows us to have much more complex brain functioning. So this blue brain is where decision-making or problem-solving or attention, all those skills needed to learn and be engaged are in this prefrontal cortex. So when we're under a great deal of stress, our limbic alarm is much more sensitive. So this is the red brain. So sometimes seemingly little non-issue things can be perceived as threatening. So a tone of voice, or sometimes we see if a little kiddo's walking in the hall and they might just get bumped, not hard, someone just accidentally knocks into them, you might see them lose it. Well, the little bump wasn't a big deal. However, their limbic alarm has been ringing, and it's they're under a great deal of stress, that it just sends them into fight or flight mode, and it's your brain's just trying to take care of itself. It's something we can't control, no matter how hard we try. It's a built-in survival mechanism. However, we can use self-regulation to soothe our limbic alarm regularly and reflect on which stressors impact us. We can reduce those stressors and respond to them with appropriate activities to maintain balance and avoid that overload that sends us into red brain mode. And red brain mode is the fight or flight that we see with kids. So we might see the meltdowns, they might be taking off, the yelling, the screaming, the hitting, or even beyond that, they could go into that freeze mode where they just completely shut down. We want to keep our blue brain online so that we can make those decisions when we're experiencing stressors about how to regulate ourselves. Self-control is possible when the blue brain is online, but we need self-regulation first to enable that to happen. And that's what Emerson was doing in that previous video, is using that self-regulation and the co-regulation with his mom to set off that limbic alarm in his brain that was going, watch out, this is danger. So what is self-regulation? That's a great question. Self-regulation means so many different things in the literature, and there actually are 447 definitions of self-regulation. Some terms that you might hear along with self-reg or self-monitoring, learning strategies, social behavior, self-control, self-determination, self-management. As part of the Algoma community practice for self-regulation, we wanted to look at creating one definition for us to use across the Algoma district, so that when we're talking about self-regulation amongst different agencies, and we're talking about with our clients and our families, that we're all kind of talking about the same thing. So some misconceptions about self-regulation are that children are able to self-regulate when they enter kindergarten. This is not true. And that children are self-regulating when they are sitting still and quietly with their legs crossed. Another misconception is that when kids look away, they need to be reminded to look back at an adult and look in their eyes to stay focused. That self-regulation is the same as compliance or self-control. That the role of the educator is to manage children's behavior. And that it's about naming emotions, not knowing that emotions cause feelings inside of us. So we all have the ability to handle a certain amount of stress before we before we experience stress overload. So I like to think of the analogy, if you're holding a serving tray, like a waitress does at a restaurant. And a water bottle represents our stressors. So a stressor could be you didn't get a good night's sleep last night, so that's a water bottle. Another stressor could be you ran out of coffee this morning, so that's another water bottle. A stressor could be we're home working COVID-19, you're trying to work from home, you're trying to teach your children, you're trying to learn about self-regulation. So that's, think of all those water bottles piling up. So then when your kid comes downstairs and asks for a snack for the 5,000th time that day, that's the water bottle that tips the tray. So while asking for a snack shouldn't make you that upset, because that's just one more water bottle on our tray of water bottles and we can't take it anymore. So that's when as adults we might kind of see that frustration that come through. And that's the same with kids. So oftentimes you'll see they might break. An example could be they're in class and they broke the tip of their pencil and it was a full-on meltdown. Well, the tip of the pencil is not a big issue on its own, but that was the water bottle that tipped their tray. And oftentimes with kids, whether we're teaching them, or they're coming in to see us at Thrive, or even as a parent, we don't always know what those stressors that they're going through are. So we don't know how many water bottles they have on that tray before they even get to us. So the definition that was created by the local self-reg committee, in simplest terms, self-regulation is how efficiently and effectively an individual deals with a stressor and then recovers. Stressors can be hidden or obvious and fall within 5 domains: biological, emotional, cognitive, social, and pro-social. So this is Stuart Shanker, and he runs the Merit Center, which is based at Trent University down in Peterborough, Ontario, and has done tons of research looking into self-regulation in the early childhood. And he looks at it as it's a developmental model, so looking at stressors across the lifespan and how stress affects development. And again, stressors can fall under the biological, emotional, cognitive, social, and pro-social domain. So one thing you might be asking yourself is, how do we turn that red brain off? How do we calm our limbic alarm so that we can help our brains to calm and the blue brain to come back on and to take control? So the process that the Merit Center has come up with is reframing, recognizing, reducing, reflecting, and responding. Now, these aren't linear. There's no particular order to these steps. Adults supporting children can start with any of these steps. And essentially, we're going to try all of them as often as we need to, and sometimes even at the same time. And we want to decrease the limbic alarm going off in our kiddo's brain by using these 5 steps of self-regulation. So reframing. When you see a child differently, you see a different child. And this is one of Stuart Shanker's quotes that he's come out with. And it really is true. You just want to shift how you're viewing the behavior. And I'm sure many of you have seen this next slide, the image of the iceberg. You see the behavior at the very top. So when a child is having a meltdown, you see the behavior. You're not seeing the whole child. You got to look deeper, and you got to use self-regulation to dig deeper and to see what's really going on. So underneath the surface, while the child's having a meltdown, underneath the surface, there could be something going on in either of the 5 domains. If we concentrate only on the behavior, so just what we can see, we're missing a lot of possible cues that can help us identify strategies that reduce or eliminate the behavior. There is no such thing as a bad kid. And in Shanker's self-regulation, he talks about stress behavior versus misbehavior. So misbehavior happens when our blue brain is running the show, and kids do misbehave. Misbehavior happens when they could have acted differently, they were aware of what they were doing, and they know that they shouldn't have been doing it, and they were fully capable of acting differently. Stress behavior happens when the limbic system, the red brain, is running the show. Kids are not fully aware of what they're doing, they're not fully aware of why they're doing it, and they have limited capacity to act differently. So stress behavior reflects a child's difficulty managing stress. A child's problem behaviors are critical signs that the brain's rational prefrontal cortex is under too much stress and the more primitive fight or flight limbic system has taken charge. It is essential, and you'll see in this slide, it's a quote by Dr. Shanker, it is essential that we do not confuse self-regulation with self-control. Self-control is about trying to inhibit impulses. Self-regulation is about reducing the incidence and intensity of impulses in the first place. Self-regulation is what makes self-control possible, and in most cases, unnecessary. So after we reframe, we want to start recognizing the stressors and being a stress detective for ourselves and for our kids. So normally we would pair up in groups to do this little activity, but maybe if you just want to take a couple of minutes after I explain it to hit pause and just think about it with yourself or with any other family members in the home, even with any of the kids in the home. So just writing down stress. So define stress and write down a definition or just think of it in your head. And then make a list of things that frustrate you or cause you stress, and be specific. Is it people's actions or words, environment, situations? One of the things we would do if we were at Thrive and there was a big group of you guys is talking about how stressors are the individuality of stressors, and how stressors are not the same for everyone. So you want to be a stress detective, and you want to ask why and why now. So when we're seeing a child with a meltdown, you want to ask, why are you seeing this now, and why are you seeing this, and why now? Stress can be anything for kids. It can change daily or even hourly for a child. And we don't necessarily know what's a stressor for them in that given moment. So something that may be a stressor for a child one day might not be a stressor for them the next. Something that might be a stressor for them this morning might not be a stressor for them this afternoon. It really is up to us as the adults for co-regulation is to help be a stress detective and to figure out what it is that's going on for the kids. So looking back at those 5 self-regulation domains, so under the biological domain, stressors could be noises, crowds, too much visual stimulation, not enough exercise, a lack of sleep, junk food. Under the emotional domain, it could be strong emotions, both positive and negative, because being super overexcited and super excited for something can have a negative impact on us. It could be anger, fear, cognitive, so difficulty processing certain kinds of information, math, reading, social, so difficulty picking up on social cues or understanding the effect our behavior has on others. Not having any friends, difficulty knowing what to do in social situations. And then pro-social is having that stress due to unfairness, taking on the stress of those around you, feeling big feelings of empathy. And just maybe hit pause for now and then just take some time to brainstorm out things that bug you. Next on your screen, you're going to see some information sheets. These are taken from the Merit Center website. It's outlining some different stressors that might fall within the different domains. So the emotional domain, the cognitive domain, social, biological, and pro-social domains. As I mentioned earlier, we don't know what is and isn't a stressor for a child. Hidden stressors are things that cause a child to burn energy without them knowing that it's happening. And the world of children and teens today is filled with hidden stressors. So sometimes even a child might not know what a stressor is for them. So the next step is helping to recognize stressors. And we want to help kids to be able to identify what stressors are for them, or we want to be able to identify for them if we recognize that something is a stressor for them. So when we see the troubling behavior, we want to ask why and why now. We have to remember when we're looking at stress and self-regulation as how our body responds to stress is that good stress uses up energy as well. Stressors differ from person to person, and they can be different from day to day or minute to minute. Each of the 5 domains influences the other, and the effects of more stressors don't add up, they multiply. So think of that tray, right? The more and more we put on, the heavier and heavier that tray gets until eventually it's going to tip. Stressors can be hidden or obvious. When our energy is depleted, stress can become unmanageable much more quickly, and a perceived threat is just as much of a stressor as a real threat. Sometimes even more so because others might ignore the stressor or belittle it. Next, you want to work with our kiddos and yourselves to reduce the stressors in the learning environment. So we'll see in this slide, everything's connected. All the domains work together. And we want to work with our kids to create a calm and supportive environment. So we want to take cues from our own self-regulation. What things are calming? How might you create some of that in a classroom or in your home? So even if you want to just hit pause and take a minute to think of your favorite calm place. And what aspects of it are in a calm place that make it calming for you. And think about our kiddos. And for teachers, think about in your classrooms. How can you create an area in your classroom that's going to be calming for the kids? So you'll see in some of these images, some things that work and some things that might not work. So in these images that you'll be seeing now, these slides, there's some classrooms where they're clean, they're tidy, but there's lots of bright colors, there's lots of stuff going on a wall, or on each wall. And while it's fun, it looks like a great place to be, for some of our kiddos, this just might be too overstimulating. And you'll see as you take a look at the different pictures, we go into a more kind of neutral color rooms where there's less bright colors all over the place. There's more neutral colors with just a couple of pops of color. In that one picture, they have 3 hanging plants. Research has been done to show that for optimal learning, 3 plants is best. These plants could be real or fake, so just bringing in that outdoors piece. So when you get into it, your eye kind of knows where to focus a bit more. So we want to look at reducing stress across the domains, the biological, emotional, cognitive, social, and pro-social. And ask yourselves, are we all the same? And how can we're not, and how can we reduce stressors in each domain for infants and toddlers, and for our kids, and for kids in our classroom, and the kids in our house? And finally, we want to reflect for ourselves and for our kids to help enhance our stress awareness. We need to help children learn, and maybe ourselves need to relearn what it feels like to be calm, and to notice when one is dipping into a low energy and high tension state. So some of our kids these days don't even know what calm feels like. So when we're asking them to sit down and calm down, they don't know what that's like. So our limbic brain, that red brain we talked about, is where we process emotions. And the limbic brain remembers experiences, every experience, but not necessarily consciously. So these limbic memories can put us into that fight or flight mode without conscious awareness, because the limbic brain never forgets a negative experience. So we want to give the limbic brain, that red brain, new memories of safety and security. We need to help kids create new neural patterns through relationships and effective experiences that show them that they can experience stress and still remain safe, they can recover, and they can be totally fine. So just consider the difference in responding to stress behavior with a behavior control management approach, or responding with that soothing connection. The latter patterns will help create those neural patterns needed to support self-regulation. And ask yourself, do you know what calm feels like? How do you know when you're feeling dysregulated? What are some of the signs? And what can we do to help children become aware of what calm feels like? So next we want to respond. We want to help them to restore their energy, to recover, to relax, to replenish. And so first I'd like you to think about, what do you do to relax and restore? So when you're feeling a high level of stress, when our water bottle has been tipped, what are some activities that you do that work? For me, sometimes it might just be going outside for 5 minutes, going for a walk around the block, taking the dog for a walk around the block. Lately, as I'm home with 2 kids and a husband, and we're all working and trying to homeschool, there's very little time for that. And that's a lot of families are feeling that too. So we have to be creative in these times of ways to kind of relax and restore. And sometimes for me, it's going downstairs to do laundry, and I just sit in the basement for 5 minutes while everybody else is upstairs, just because I need that time for myself. What can our kids and our students do to help them? How within a classroom can you create kind of microenvironments to help kids with their own self-regulatory strategy? It's so important to note that the well-being of children is inseparable from the well-being of the critical adults in their lives. Stress is a two-way cycle. Situations where a child's arousal, a kid's having a meltdown, they easily can trigger hyperarousal in the parent. Remember, the interbrain, our brains are connected, the co-regulation piece. And as a result, if I'm working with a kiddo or working on my own kids, and they're in a high stress state, and then I'm in a high stress state, stress is just getting communicated back and forth between the interbrain. So we need to kind of just take a step back and recognize that as adults, our stress level is extremely important. And we can't help our kids self-regulate until we're self-regulated. And this goes the same for teachers. When they have 30 kids in their class and kiddos are struggling with self-regulation, teachers need, first and foremost, to manage their own self-regulation and to know that self-regulation is as much for us as the adults as it is for the kids, because we cannot help kids self-regulate if we're always in a high stress state ourselves. This is an interesting chart. It's from the Self-Reg Toolkit from Dr. Shanker's website, www.self-reg.ca. If you look in their toolkit, it's a tool to watch and track your own progress as you learn how to self-regulate. And as you gain experience kind of thinking in the self-reg terms, you'll develop these skills gradually and as you learn more and more, but most importantly, as you try it. I encourage you all to implement some of these steps, to try them and watch how your approach changes. Self-regulation doesn't happen in this perfect little bubble in an ideal situation. It happens in real life. So this is just a nice way to kind of track how you're developing and the different steps and kind of giving you some next steps as to where to go with your learning. So what is self-regulation? It's a complex interaction of 5 domains: biological, emotional, cognitive, social, and prosocial. It's a process, and it's essential to development and well-being. What is it not? Self-reg is not self-control or compliance. It's not about goal planning, and it's not a manualized program. And I think this is one of the things that makes it so great is we're not going into families' homes or into classrooms and saying, here's another program you guys need to implement. We're saying, listen, stress matters and your stress matters, and we have to take care of ourselves and help our kids take care of ourselves, and so we can teach them those skills to self-regulate. It is certainly understandable that educators might be drawn to programs that promise a quick fix to problems in self-regulation. But our experience, and this is from Dr. Shanker, has been that there really is no such thing. All too often, the quick fix in question turns out to be trying to teach children about self-regulation as opposed to helping them learn how to self-regulate. Self-regulation is a process, not a program. And just as child development is nonlinear and happens through experience, so does self-regulation. It can't be learned through a step-by-step program. It's learned through shared experiences, affect, and relationships. Experiences lead to new neural patterns that signal safety instead of threat. Programs tend to be cognitive, so they get you thinking about self-regulation rather than doing it. When we're dysregulated, our cognitive blue brains are minimized, so we find that children cannot use these cognitively learned tools when dysregulated. And often we'll see that is kids after meltdown can tell you what they could have done or what they should have done, and what the better way to respond was. However, in the moment they can't, and that's because the blue brain, where all their cognitive thinking skills are, is off, because the red brain, the limbic alarm, is being triggered. Some of these programs contain tools, and this is not self-regulation, so some of the programs that we previously used to use contain tools that can help children to understand emotions and to label what they see or feel, but those are targeting more that self-control aspect of their behaviors and not self-regulation. Further, many programs may place judgment on a specific zone that a child should be in, or a specific way that they should be feeling, where self-regulation doesn't tell a child that he shouldn't be in a certain zone. It's mindfulness, and it's creating that acceptance of the fact that a child can get dysregulated, and that's okay. It's okay to get stressors. We as adults get stressors. Self-regulation teaches kids that it's okay, and here's some strategies to try to help us lower our stress. You might be wondering, okay, this is great. What can I do? So calm begets calm begets calm. So you need a calm brain to calm a brain. So first and foremost, as I said, it's working with us as the parents and and the teachers, the OTs, the educators, working on our own self-regulation. We want to look for when our students are calm, actually calm, and draw attention to it, and our kids. Calm is not just sitting quietly and being still. When you notice one of your students or one of your kiddos really into an activity or really calm, and you could tell they're just really focused on what they're doing, point it out to them. Let them know, hey, you look really calm right now. How does that feel? And get them talking about how that feels in their body, so that when we're asking them to calm down or we're working towards being calm, kids know that feeling that they're working for. And it's not just a word, it's a feeling in their bodies. So we want to draw our attention, or draw students and kids' attention to when they're actually calm. We want to be their co-regulator, not their behavior controller. They don't need us to come in and tell them what to do when they're having a meltdown. They need us to help co-regulate. We want to help kids identify and recognize stress cues that we see, but they don't. Talk out loud about your stress and your stress management. Let kids know that you're working on it as well. I know the other day I was trying to making muffins with my 4-year-old, and the 1-year-old was crying and trying to get the muffins made because the 4-year-old wanted to stir the batter, but I'm trying to deal with the screaming baby, and then the dog was trying to get on the counter to eat the food. I could tell myself that I was just getting frustrated. I remember looking at my daughter and I said, I'm frustrated and I don't want to be frustrated. And she goes, Mom, sometimes I like to take a deep breath. And so I stopped and took a deep breath. And she goes, would you like a hug? I said, yeah. And then she gave me a hug. And from there, I was able to take that time, acknowledge that by me getting worked up was not going to help any of us, and take that time, kind of reset, and then move forward. And because I talked out loud about it, and because I just happened to say in a moment of frustration that I'm frustrated and I don't want to be, my daughter was able to give me some strategies. And that's how she'll learn when she's frustrated that it's okay to talk about it. So we want to help our kids restore their energy. So oftentimes we'll hear after a kid's had a major meltdown that they're tired, they have low energy, and of course they are. Their body's just gone through a lot. So we want to help find activities to help kind of give them that boost that they need. And this can be done by asking them, talking to them about what activities they find energizing. Be a stress detective. Ask why and why now. I know a lot of behaviors, when I'm talking to different families right now, we're seeing a lot of different behaviors that we haven't seen before. And I think a big situation is look at all these things that our kids are going through. So much credit is being given to all the essential workers out there, doctors, grocery store workers, nurses, postal workers. Everyone's out there doing a great job and getting the credit they so deserve. I think our credit also needs to go to a lot of these kids and go to all these kids. Their lives have been totally disrupted without the understanding that us as adults have. They can't see their friends anymore. They can't see their teachers. So they're going through quite a bit. So a lot of times when even with my kids or might hear from clients, oh, we're seeing this, we're seeing that. We really got to look at why and why now and just look at their lives have been completely turned upside down. And we can't even offer them like a timeline as to when it's going to be over because we don't know. So ask why and why now. Optimal learning for kids happens when they feel safe and secure. And your stress matters. And that's so important. Your stress matters. And we need to work on our own stress. And when in doubt, how to help get the blue brain back in charge. So you might be saying, okay, what do I do during the middle of a meltdown or a tantrum? You want to regulate yourself so that you can lend your calm. So if a child's having a meltdown and you go into it high stress, you're both going to just keep sending stress back and forth to each other. So you have to do what you need to do to regulate yourself so you can lend your calm. You want to use nonverbal communications. So don't talk too much. I know when I'm feeling frustrated, if someone's coming at me, even with like really good ideas to help me not be frustrated, I just don't want to listen. And that's true for lots of our kids. And interestingly enough, when the red brain is running the show and the kids are in the middle of a fight or flight experience, the muscles in their middle ear have constricted. So they actually can't hear us. So oftentimes we'll hear, well, we're calling their name over and over and they're not listening. They're not misbehaving. They actually can't hear you. So how do we communicate with them? We want to use nonverbal communication. So it could be gesturing for a hug or very simplified language like, do you want to squeeze? Because sometimes kids, that deep pressure helps them to feel calm. If you do have to talk very slowly and calmly to them. And you want to get down to their eye level. If we are standing above them during a meltdown, we're immediately perceived as a threat. So we want to lower our voices, slow it down, get to our kids' level, and we want to get them to smile and smile back at them. You can't fake a smile. Kids know if you're faking a smile, so you want to be genuinely interested in one of their interests. If your red brain is going off, that limbic alarm, it's leaking through your body language, your eyes, and your tone of voice. So you really got to work on your own self-reg. And then protect their dignity. This is so important. Don't yell at them in front of their peers or their siblings. When kids are in a meltdown, they're not doing this on purpose. Their brains are just so overloaded with stress, so we got to help them kind of restore. They all feel bad when they're done because they're not doing this consciously. This is just how their brain is wired, like programming to protect them right now. So really, please protect their dignity. So where to find more? Like I said, this is just like teeny tiny tip of the iceberg introduction on self-regulation. He has some books out, some of them being Self-Reg, Calm, Alert, and Learning, and a new one called Reframed that just came out in April. Mine just came in the mail the other day, so I'll be excited to get started on that. He has lots of free online resources. So if you go to www.self-reg.ca, there's infographics, there's blogs, there's viewpoints, there's videos. There's all the graphics that we found on this website or in this presentation are from that website. You can also do online learning for self-regulation with the Merit Center. They have a foundation certificate program, parenting courses, early childhood development. They have a Facebook page, parenting group, parenting resources, a blog. They have a magazine, a discussion guide for the book Self-Reg. They have tons of information to help you continue on your self-reg journey if this is information you'd like to know more about. Resources for educators. There's a self-reg portal and there's a self-reg toolkit to help you introduce some of these things in your classroom. So finally, just wanted to leave you with this image again and this quote of, see a child differently, you see a different child. So when we're doing self-regulation, it's not about what to do. We don't want to add anything more onto your plate or your tray. We know your trays are full. We don't do self-regulation in a manualized program anyways. Research has not supported its effectiveness. What we do ask you to do is to use this information to think differently about how you approach your own stress first and that of the people around you. Begin by reframing behaviors. Become a stress detective and reduce those stressors. Reflect often, engage in and offer a menu of restorative activities within the classroom or within your home, something for everyone, and be flexible. Think differently. That's all we're asking you to do, is think differently and your approach will change. When your approach changes and you learn bit by bit through the discussed resources, your classroom and your home will evolve into a self-reg center and ultimately a self-reg haven. Self-regulation is good for everyone. So please think differently. When you see a child differently, you see a different child, pay attention to your own stress and enjoy the next presentation.